Good evening, and welcome to Last Week Tonight. Tonight, we are launching an exciting, brand new, and frankly deeply concerning game show segment we're calling Who's Trump Suing Today? Yes, that's right. It's the show where one man's legal grievances become our collective prime-time entertainment. It's a bit like The Price is Right, except instead of bidding on a new dinette set, the contestants are multi-billion-dollar media conglomerates, and the prize is a multi-million-dollar defamation lawsuit. The rules are simple. We have a giant wheel, a lot of potential defendants, and a plaintiff who seems to have more lawsuits than he does branded stakes. And yes, that is saying something. It's a legal spectacle for the ages, and you've all got front row seats. To help us navigate this labyrinth of litigation, we've brought in a panel of legal luminaries, our very own dream team, if you will, or perhaps more accurately, a fever dream team. First up, we have the man, the myth, the legend, who once held a press conference between a crematorium and a sex shop, the one and only Rudy Giuliani. Give him a hand. Next, fresh from her quest to release the Kraken, it's the incomparable Sidney Powell. And of course, no legal panel would be complete without Donald Trump's current go-to attorney, the ever-present Alina Habba. Finally, for a dose of actual, legal sanity, we have, above the law's own Liz Dye. Welcome everyone, to a show that's less about jurisprudence and more about pure, uncut spite. Now, our star contestant, Donald J. Trump, is no stranger to the courtroom. In fact, he's what you might call a frequent flyer in the litigation lounge. He's collected lawsuits like some people collect stamps, if those stamps were all emblazoned with the words, "I'll see you in court." It's a hobby, a passion, a lifestyle. He's a man who has seemingly never met a problem he didn't think could be solved by suing it into oblivion. This is a man who probably tried to sue his own shadow for being too close to him, or sue the concept of Mondays for being, well, Mondays. His legal history isn't just a footnote, it's the entire encyclopedia. So, let's get this show on the road. The energy is high, the legal fees are higher, and the potential for sheer, unadulterated chaos is off the charts. We're about to find out who will be the next lucky participant in this high-stakes game of legal chicken. Will it be a news organization, a tech giant, a political rival, a moderately critical pigeon that looked at him the wrong way? With this show, truly anything is possible. So grab your popcorn, settle in, and prepare for a legal battle royale that promises to be as unpredictable as it is utterly mesmerizing. This is Who's Trump Suing Today, and the first spin is coming right up. Before we give our magnificent wheel its inaugural spin, let's take a moment to look back at the Hall of Fame, or perhaps the Hall of Shame, depending on your perspective, of past contestants. This isn't just a list of names, it's a veritable who's who of entities that have found themselves on the receiving end of a Trump legal filing. It's like a high school burn book, but with official court seals and billable hours that could fund a small nation. The wheel is practically groaning under the weight of all the past targets, each one a story of journalistic inquiry or political opposition met with the subtlety of a sledgehammer. Our wheel includes some of the biggest names in media. We've got the New York Times, CNN, and the Washington Post. The holy trinity of what he likes to call fake news. Even the venerable BBC from across the pond has earned a coveted spot. It seems that reporting facts that are inconvenient is the fastest way to get your name painted in gold on this wheel. Then we have the tech behemoths, Google, Twitter, and Facebook. These are the digital town squares where public opinion is shaped, and apparently, our contestant feels they haven't been shaping it quite to his liking. So naturally, the solution is to sue them until they do. It's a bold strategy, Cotton. Let's see if it pays off for him. But it doesn't stop there. Oh no, this wheel has range. We also have the Pulitzer Prize Board, which was sued for the high crime of awarding prizes for reporting he didn't appreciate. That's right, he sued an award. That's like suing the Nobel Committee because you think the Peace Prize should have gone to you for not starting a war you were thinking about starting. The audacity is, you have to admit, breathtaking. And of course, we have his political adversaries. New York Attorney General Letitia James is on there, as is his 2016 rival, Hillary Clinton, proving that some grudges are apparently forever. The wheel represents a fundamental philosophy: if you can't beat them, sue them. If you can beat them, sue them anyway just for good measure. It's a testament to a belief that the legal system is not just a tool for justice but a weapon for intimidation, a platform for grievance, and a stage for performance. So, as I place my hand on this magnificent, lawsuit-laden wheel, just feel the tension in the air. The anticipation is palpable. The legal clerks are standing by, the printing presses are warmed up, and a whole new chapter of litigation is about to be written. Are you ready? Let's spin that wheel! And the winner is the Internal Revenue Service. That's right, folks. In a stunning turn of events, President Trump is suing the very government agency he, as president, oversees. He's suing the tax man. It's the ultimate showdown. The nation's most famous billionaire versus the department in charge of collecting the nation's money, for a staggering $10 billion in damages. This isn't just suing the government, it's like suing your own left arm for not high-fiving you properly. This is a truly audacious move, even for him. The lawsuit, filed in January of this year, 2026, names not just the IRS but the entire U.S. Treasury Department as defendants. The core allegation is that these agencies failed spectacularly in their duty to protect his confidential tax information, leading to a massive leak that he claims caused immense reputational and financial harm. The lawsuit argues this wasn't just a simple mistake or a security oversight. It was a politically motivated attack designed to embarrass him and tarnish his business empire. And he's not alone. His sons, Don Jr. and Eric, along with the Trump Organization, are co-plaintiffs in this monumental legal battle. The timing and the target are just extraordinary. Think about it. A sitting president suing a core executive branch agency. It's like the CEO of Coca-Cola suing his own bottling plant for making the drinks too fizzy. The lawsuit was filed in Miami federal court and has been assigned to Judge Kathleen Williams, an Obama appointee, which is a little detail that I'm sure will add absolutely no drama whatsoever to the proceedings. This case is not just unusual, it's practically unheard of. It blurs the lines between the head of the executive branch and the agencies that fall under his command, creating a constitutional hall of mirrors that legal scholars will be dissecting for decades. So, the IRS is our big winner tonight. Congratulations, I guess. Your prize is a mountain of legal paperwork and a legal battle with your own boss. This lawsuit opens up a Pandora's box of questions about privacy, government responsibility, and the weaponization of personal data. But to truly understand how we got here, how a president ended up suing his own treasury for $10 billion, we need to go back to the source of the leak. We need to talk about the man who decided to pull the pin on this financial grenade and toss it into the public square. We need to talk about a man named Charles Littlejohn. So, who is this Charles Littlejohn, the man at the center of this $10 billion storm? Was he a master spy, a shadowy hacker from a foreign land? No, not quite. The reality is both more mundane and in some ways, more terrifying. Charles Chaz Littlejohn was an IT specialist. He was a government contractor working for a company called Booz Allen Hamilton, a firm that has held massive lucrative contracts with the US government for decades. His job, ironically, was to help maintain the data pipeline for the IRS. He was, for all intents and purposes, a digital janitor, given the keys to one of the most sensitive databases in the entire world, the tax records of every single American. Think about that for a second. This wasn't some outsider who had to breach firewalls and dodge digital security. He was an insider. He was the guy they trusted to be inside the vault, polishing the gold bars. Between 2019 and 2020, Littlejohn used his privileged access to do something truly unprecedented. He began systematically stealing data. He didn't just grab a file or two. He orchestrated what one judge would later call the biggest heist in IRS history. He downloaded and walked away with the tax returns of literally hundreds of thousands of the wealthiest Americans, a treasure trove of financial secrets that powerful people had spent fortunes to keep private. His motive, according to his own statements, was ideological. Littlejohn believed that the American public had a right to know how the ultra-wealthy and politically powerful, including then-President Trump, managed their finances. He felt that there was a massive gap between their public personas and their private tax filings, and he saw himself as a whistleblower acting in the public interest. He wasn't trying to get rich or sell the data to the highest bidder. He decided to give it away for free to two of the most prominent news organizations in the country, the New York Times and the non-profit investigative journalism outlet, ProPublica. This act set in motion a chain of events that would rock the worlds of politics, media, and finance. Little John meticulously planned his data exfiltration, using his expertise to cover his tracks. He wasn't just a disgruntled employee clicking download all. He was a methodical actor with a clear goal. He took Donald Trump's tax data, spanning over a decade, and hand-delivered it to the Times. He then provided a much larger data set, containing information on thousands of other wealthy individuals, to ProPublica. He was the single point of failure in a system we all rely on to keep our most private financial information secure, and his actions would soon expose some explosive secrets. Once Charles Littlejohn handed over his stolen data, the journalistic floodgates burst open. First, went to press. In a series of bombshell articles, they used the 15 years of Trump's tax returns, some of which were also allegedly provided by his niece Mary Trump, to paint a picture of a businessman who was far from the Midas-touched mogul he claimed to be. The headline-grabbing revelation was that in 2016, the year he was elected President of the United States, Donald Trump paid a grand total of $750 in federal income tax. $750. That's less than most people pay for a new phone, and, honestly, almost certainly less than the cost of one of his signature red ties. The revelations didn't stop there. They reported that Trump had paid no federal income taxes at all in 10 of the previous 15 years. How? By reporting massive business losses that offset any income he might have had. The articles depicted him not as a brilliant tycoon, but as a serial fabulist who leveraged debt, aggressive write-offs, and a dizzying array of shell companies to minimize his tax burden to virtually nothing. It was a stunning exposé that directly contradicted the image of unparalleled success he had carefully cultivated for decades. It's no wonder he's also suing over these very articles. When the truth hurts, your first instinct might be to sue the messenger for punching you with it. Meanwhile, took its massive data set and focused on a broader story. Their series, titled The Secret IRS Files, investigated the tax avoidance strategies of the ultra-wealthy as a class. They revealed how billionaires like Jeff Bezos, Elon Musk and Michael Bloomberg have, in some years, also paid little to no federal income tax. They detailed how the system is, honestly, just rife with legal loopholes, from borrowing against massive stock portfolios to structuring assets in complex ways that allow the richest of the rich to shrink their tax liability to a fraction of what ordinary wage earners pay. Their reporting wasn't just about one person, it was a systemic critique of a tax code that seems to favor the very people who need its advantages the least. The combined impact of these stories was seismic. They fueled a national debate about tax fairness, wealth inequality, and the integrity of the tax system itself. For supporters of Trump, it was a politically motivated hit job using illegally obtained information. For his critics, it was the ultimate proof that the system was rigged in favor of the powerful. Regardless of where you stood, the leaks confirmed a suspicion that many people had held for years, that there are two tax systems in America. There's one, for you and me, where taxes are automatically deducted from our paychecks, and another, entirely different one for those who can afford armies of accountants to navigate a labyrinth of loopholes. For a while, it honestly seemed like the leaker might just get away with it. The stories were published, the outrage was palpable, but the source remained a mystery. However, federal investigators are, if nothing else, persistent. Their investigation eventually led them to a single IRS contractor with access to all the stolen data. In July of 2023, federal agents executed a search warrant on Charles Littlejohn's home. Faced with overwhelming evidence, he began cooperating with prosecutors. The digital ghost who had haunted the tax records of the super-rich was finally unmasked. Being a whistleblower is one thing. Being a whistleblower caught by the FBI is a whole different ballgame. On September 29, 2023, Littlejohn pleaded guilty to one felony count of unauthorized disclosure of taxpayer information. Now you might be thinking, just one count for the biggest data heist in IRS history? That's a very good question, and one that the judge in the case would later ask with considerable frustration. The prosecutor explained that the single count was part of a plea deal negotiated in exchange for Littlejohn's full cooperation. It's a common, legal tactic. But it did feel a bit like charging a bank robber who cleaned out every vault with only stealing a single lollipop from the teller's counter on his way out. The real drama came on January 29, 2024, at his sentencing. The presiding judge, Ana Reyes, was not impressed by the plea deal. She publicly questioned why only one charge was filed, calling Littlejohn's actions an attack on our constitutional democracy. She sentenced him to 5 years in prison, the absolute statutory maximum for the charge. This was a sentence far above the standard 10 months typically recommended for such a crime, sending a clear and powerful message. Judge Reyes stated that what Littlejohn had done warranted a severe punishment to deter anyone else from ever thinking they could appoint themselves the arbiter of what confidential information should be made public. The law here is crystal clear and incredibly strict for a very good reason. Your tax return contains some of your most private information. Your income, your dependents, your charitable donations, your medical expenses. Federal law, specifically 26 U.S. Code Section 7213, makes it a felony for any federal employee or contractor to willfully disclose that information without authorization. The principle is that for the tax system to function, citizens must trust that the government will keep their data secure. Littlejohn shattered that trust. No matter how noble he believed his motives were, he broke a fundamental law and the justice system made an example of him. Now, this brings us to the core of Trump's $10 billion lawsuit. You might be wondering, how can you even sue the government? Don't they just, make the rules? Generally, that's true. There's a legal principle called sovereign immunity, which is a fancy way of saying the king can do no wrong. It's an ancient concept inherited from English law that essentially protects the government from being sued without its consent. If you trip on a crack in the sidewalk in front of a federal building, you can't just sue the United States for being clumsy. The government has to have passed a law that specifically says, okay, in this particular situation, you have our permission to sue us. This is where the Trump lawsuit finds its legal footing. While sovereign immunity is the general rule, Congress has created specific exceptions. They've passed laws that act as a waiver, effectively giving citizens a green light to sue the government under very specific circumstances. In the case of tax privacy, there are two key laws at play. The first is the Privacy Act of 1974, which governs how federal agencies can collect, use, and disseminate individuals' personal information. The second and more direct law is 26 U.S. Code Section 7431, which explicitly allows taxpayers to file a civil suit for damages against the United States if any officer or employee of the government knowingly or negligently discloses their confidential tax return information. This law is the battering ram that Trump's lawyers are using to break down the fortress of sovereign immunity. The statute essentially says that if the IRS fails in its most basic duty to protect your data, you have the right to hold it accountable in court. The law allows for damages, which is why Trump is able to ask for such an astronomical sum. He is arguing that the IRS was, at the very least, negligent in allowing a contractor like Charles Littlejohn to have such unfettered access to sensitive data and to exfiltrate it over a period of many months without being detected. The lawsuit claims the agency's security protocols were a catastrophic failure. So, while suing the government is rare and difficult, this is one of the specific scenarios where it is explicitly allowed. Trump's case isn't arguing against the principle of sovereign immunity itself. It's arguing that this situation falls squarely into a pre-approved exception created by Congress. The argument is simple. The law promises that your tax data will be kept private. The IRS broke that promise, and now the law says you can sue them for the damages caused by that breach. Whether he can prove the IRS was negligent and that he suffered $10 billion worth of damages is the multi-billion-dollar question that will now be decided in court. Here is one of the most fascinating footnotes to this entire saga. The leak didn't just affect Donald Trump. Charles Littlejohn stole the tax information of hundreds of thousands of the wealthiest Americans. So, when the news broke that the IRS had suffered the biggest data heist in its history, you would have expected a flood of lawsuits, right? A tidal wave of angry billionaires descending upon the courthouse, all demanding their pound of flesh from the government. And yet, that flood never came. In fact, aside from Donald Trump, very few of the victims have chosen to sue. It's a curious case of collective silence from some of the most powerful people on the planet. So why the hesitation? There are a few likely reasons, and the most obvious one is publicity. Filing a lawsuit is a public act. It puts your name in the headlines and invites intense scrutiny. For many of the ultra-wealthy, the entire point of their sophisticated tax planning is to remain private and avoid public examination. The last thing they would want is to join a lawsuit that would inevitably lead to reporters digging even deeper into the very tax returns they want to keep secret. Suing the government for a privacy breach would, ironically, force them into the public spotlight and generate the exact kind of attention they've spent millions to avoid. It's like trying to put out a fire with a bucket of gasoline. Furthermore, there's the potential for embarrassment. The ProPublica reports, based on the leaked data, detailed perfectly legal but perhaps ethically questionable tax avoidance strategies. While paying little to no income tax might be a financial victory, it's not exactly a great look in the court of public opinion. Joining a high-profile lawsuit would mean their names would be forever linked to stories about how the super-rich legally sidestep the tax obligations that apply to everyone else. It could be seen as complaining about a privacy breach that revealed just how little they contribute to the system that allows their wealth to flourish. That's a PR nightmare that no amount of damages could easily fix. In the end, it seems that for most of the victims, the cost of suing, in terms of unwanted attention and potential public backlash, outweighed the potential financial reward. They likely chose to suffer the privacy violation in silence rather than risk an even greater loss of privacy and reputation. Donald Trump, of course, operates under a completely different set of rules. For him, publicity is never a downside. A lawsuit is not just a legal tool, it's a media strategy. He thrives in the spotlight and is never shy about fighting his battles in public. While other billionaires ran from the cameras, he ran towards them with a lawsuit in hand, turning a moment of vulnerability into another chapter of his public spectacle. So, after all this, what can the average person take away from this billion-dollar legal drama? Well, for one, it's a stark reminder that in the digital age, your personal information is never truly 100% secure, not even when it's held by the United States government. If the IRS, with its massive budget and security apparatus, can be breached by a single insider, it highlights the vulnerability we all face. It's a good time to practice some basic digital hygiene. Think of your personal data, like your underwear drawer. You don't want just anyone rummaging through it. Use strong, unique passwords for different sites, and enable two-factor authentication wherever you can. It's the digital equivalent of putting a lock on that drawer. There are also services out there specifically designed to help you protect your privacy. Think about using a password manager to keep track of all those unique passwords, so you don't have to remember them all. Consider using privacy-focused browsers or VPNs to minimize the digital footprint you leave behind as you navigate the web. While these tools can't protect you from a determined insider at a government agency, they can significantly reduce your exposure to the more common threats of hackers, scammers, and data brokers who are constantly trying to get their hands on your information for their own profit. A little bit of prevention is worth a pound of cure, especially when the cure involves years of legal battles. This whole episode, from the leak to the lawsuit, is a perfect storm of modern anxieties. It touches on wealth inequality, political polarization, data privacy, and the very nature of truth in the media. It shows what happens when one person decides to take the law into their own hands, and what happens when another person decides to use the law as a weapon. Charles Littlejohn believed he was serving the public good, but he broke a fundamental law and is now paying a steep price. Donald Trump believes he is owed $10 billion for the damage done to his reputation, a reputation that has been the subject of endless public debate for decades. And in the end, that's what this all comes down to. A clash of principles played out on the grandest stage possible. Whether you see this as a righteous fight for privacy or a cynical ploy for attention, one thing is certain: we will all be watching. So, keep your passwords strong and your legal briefs stronger, because in a world where anyone can sue anyone for anything, and where your most private data can end up on the front page, the only things you can truly count on are death, taxes, and, it seems, lawsuits. Especially lawsuits. Good night.